You thought losing you was nothing. Fine. Don't argue, don't beg, don't explain. Just detach and watch what happens when your energy disappears, when your access is gone, when your silence is real. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop proving, the moment you stop returning to fix what they keep breaking, that's when they feel it. Not your tears, not your paragraphs, but the cost of your absence. And by then, you won't be trying to be chosen anymore. You'll be choosing yourself. Detachment is not coldness, and I need you to let that sink in because you've been trained to believe that if you don't chase, you don't care. If you don't explain, you're giving up. If you don't fight for it, you're being heartless. But detachment is not the absence of love, it's the presence of self-respect. It's the moment you stop auditioning for someone to choose you, stop performing your pain to be taken seriously, stop proving your loyalty as if your devotion is a currency that buys commitment. Detachment is you finally realizing that your heart is not a bargain. It's not a discount item. It's not a maybe. It's not something someone gets to access only when it suits them. It's something sacred, something steady, something that deserves to be treated with care, without you having to beg for it. Because the truth is, when you've been dealing with someone who can lose you and act like it was nothing, your instinct is to do more. You talk more, you explain more, you love louder, you become more available, more forgiving, more patient, because your nervous system thinks, if I can just show them how valuable this is, they'll finally hold it properly. But that is where the trap begins, because the more you try to convince someone, the more you silently accept that your value is up for debate. You start negotiating your worth in small ways. You tolerate late replies that leave you anxious. You accept inconsistency as they're busy. You swallow your needs so you don't feel like a burden. You become careful with your words like you're walking through a room full of glass, and slowly, you don't even notice it happening. You start turning love into an audition. You start thinking, if I say it perfectly, if I stay calm enough, if I ask for less, if I'm easier, if I'm cooler, if I'm softer, then I'll be chosen. And that is the moment love stops being love and starts being survival. Detachment is when you wake up to that and you decide, I will no longer make myself smaller to make someone else more comfortable. I will no longer hand my peace to someone who keeps dropping it. I will no longer turn my needs into a negotiation. I will no longer chase someone who only feels powerful when I'm the one reaching. And I know there is a part of you that panics at that because you've been living in a loop where your effort is the glue. Your effort is what keeps the connection alive. Your effort is what smooths over the silence, what repairs the distance, what brings them back after they disappear. So when you imagine detaching, it feels like you're stepping off a cliff, because if you stop trying, what happens? If you stop reaching, will they vanish completely? If you stop explaining, will you be misunderstood forever? If you stop giving, will you be abandoned? That fear is real and it hurts because it comes from the part of you that has been trying to earn safety from someone who keeps creating uncertainty. But detachment is not you saying, I don't care. It's you saying, I care about myself too. It's you saying, I can love you and still refuse to be treated casually. It's you saying, I can miss you and still choose the decision that protects my dignity. It's you saying, I can feel everything and still not act from desperation. Because the problem was never your feelings. The problem was what you did with them. The problem was the way you turned your longing into chasing, the way you turned your confusion into over-explaining, the way you turned your anxiety into availability. Detachment is when you keep your feelings, but you stop letting your feelings drive you into a version of yourself you don't even recognize. The version that waits by the phone, the version that accepts crumbs, the version that apologizes for asking for basic clarity, the version that feels guilty for wanting consistency. And here's the hardest part to accept. Sometimes you chase because deep down, you want them to validate your importance. You want them to finally say, you mattered. You want them to finally act like losing you wasn't nothing. You want the apology, the regret, the moment they realize what they had. And I understand that because when someone treats your absence like it's small, it hits your ego, it hits your heart, it hits that tender place that whispers, maybe I wasn't enough. So you try to create a reaction, you try to pull proof out of them, you try to force recognition. But detachment is the moment you stop needing proof from the person who refused to see you clearly. Detachment is you choosing to believe what their pattern has already shown you without demanding they confess it. Detachment is you taking your power back from the fantasy that their validation will heal your wound, because it won't. The healing begins when you stop asking the same person to stop hurting you and you start refusing the conditions that keep you bleeding. Detachment is also grief, and people don't say that enough. It's grief because you're not only letting go of them, you're letting go of the role you played, the fixer, the rescuer, the one who kept the connection alive. You're letting go of the hope that if you just tried harder, it would become steady. You're letting go of the dream that one day they would finally hold you the way you've been holding them. And grief can make you feel like you're doing something wrong, because it feels like loss. But sometimes loss is not punishment, it's protection. Sometimes loss is the doorway to a life where you don't have to earn basic respect. Sometimes the pain of letting go is the price of finally coming home to yourself. So when you detach, do it cleanly, not loudly, not dramatically, not as a performance. Detach in the smallest moments, when your fingers hover over the keyboard and you want to send that message just to feel close again. Detach when you want to ask, "Did I matter to you?" Because someone who makes you ask that question has already answered it with their behavior. Detach when you want to shrink your needs to keep their attention. Detach when you feel the urge to audition for love and instead sit with the truth. Love that is right for you does not require you to compete for it. Love that is right for you does not require you to beg for presents. Love that is right for you does not make you feel anxious for having a heart. And I want you to remember this: detachment is not you becoming hard. It's you becoming grounded. It's you learning to hold your own hand through the discomfort instead of reaching for the person who taught you discomfort in the first place. It's you choosing silence over self-betrayal, choosing space over confusion, choosing dignity over access. It's you finally living like your heart is not a bargain, like your love is not something that can be taken lightly, like your presence is a privilege. And you don't have to convince anyone of that. You just have to act like it's true, even when it aches, even when you miss them, even when part of you still hopes they'll turn around. Because the moment you stop auditioning is the moment you start remembering that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person to pay the price of real love. There is a very specific kind of pain that comes from knowing you mattered, feeling you mattered, giving everything like you mattered, and then watching someone act like losing you was nothing. It doesn't just hurt your heart, it messes with your identity, because you start asking yourself questions you never should have to ask. Was I not enough? Was I too much? Did I love wrong? Did I choose wrong? Did I imagine the connection? And I need you to hear this with absolute clarity. The avoidant does not always register your value in the moments you are explaining it. They often register it in the moments it disappears. Not because you have to punish them, not because love is a game, but because your presence has been covering up the consequences of their distance. Your availability has been making their avoidance feel safe. Your patience has been making their inconsistency feel manageable. And when you finally step back, the comfort of "this means nothing" starts to fall apart, because your absence removes the cushion they've been leaning on. You see, when someone is avoidant, they don't just detach from you, they detach from their own feelings. They learn how to minimize, how to intellectualize, how to stay busy, how to act unbothered, how to turn emotion into a small, controllable thing. It's not always arrogance, it's often self-protection. If they admit you mattered, they have to admit they could be hurt. If they admit they miss you, they have to admit they need someone. If they admit the loss, they have to face the grief. And grief is messy. Grief is vulnerable. Grief is the very thing they spend their whole life trying to avoid. So they tell themselves a story. "It wasn't that serious. We weren't really that close. I'm fine. I'll move on." And on the surface, it looks like confidence, but underneath it is often fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of regret, fear of the truth that they had something real and they didn't know how to hold it. And this is why your chasing never works, because when you chase, you give them a way out of feeling. The more you message, the more you check in, the more you try to get closure, the more you keep the connection alive, the more you reduce the impact of your absence. You turn the loss into a conversation, you turn the consequence into a negotiation, you turn their decision into something you're still managing, and they stay comfortable in that because they don't have to sit with the full weight of what they did. They can keep you close enough to soothe their loneliness while still staying distant enough to protect their control. Meanwhile, you are the one bleeding because you're trying to extract reassurance from someone who can only offer you uncertainty. So the second key truth is this: your absence is not a tantrum, it is a boundary. It is the first moment you stop rescuing them from the experience of losing you. And I know that sounds harsh because you have a heart, you don't want anyone to hurt, you want love to work, you want peace. But you also need to understand that every time you come back too quickly, every time you soften too soon, every time you accept a half apology or a sweet message that leads nowhere, you teach them that they can lose you without actually losing you. You teach them that the door will always reopen, no matter how casually they closed it. You teach them that your love is endless, and endless love sounds romantic until it becomes a reason for someone to stop respecting it. When you finally stop returning, something changes inside them, and it often happens in stages. First, they feel relief because distance is familiar, it's comfortable, it's control. They tell themselves they're fine. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They act like nothing happened. And if you see that, it can break you because you think their calm is proof you didn't matter. But the calm is often avoidance. It's the nervous system exhaling after intensity. Then real life starts to hit, not in dramatic ways, but in quiet moments. They reach for their phone and there's no message. They have a thought and there's no one to share it with. They feel stressed and there's no warmth waiting for them. They feel lonely and there's no easy access to your comfort. And slowly, the story of this was nothing becomes harder to maintain because nothing doesn't leave a silence that loud. Nothing doesn't create an emptiness that follows you around the room. Nothing doesn't show up at 2 a.m. when you stop being busy and you have to sit with yourself. And that's when the realization begins. Not always as love, but as loss. They start to realize you were the steady one. You were the one who cared in a consistent way. You were the one who made space for them. You were the one who forgave. You were the one who stayed present when they went distant. You were the one who brought warmth into their life, not by demanding, but by offering. And when that offering is gone, they feel the contrast. They feel the gap between what they told themselves and what they actually lost. They may not admit it out loud. They may not even know how to name it, but they feel it because the nervous system recognizes the absence of safety even when the mind tries to deny it. But listen carefully. This is not about you hoping they suffer. This is about you understanding the truth, that your value is not proven by their reaction. It is proven by the fact that your absence changes the environment. Your absence creates a different reality. Your absence forces honesty. And whether they use that honesty to grow or to repeat the pattern is up to them. But your responsibility is not to keep returning to make their life comfortable. Your responsibility is to protect your own heart from being treated like it's nothing. And this is where you must anchor yourself because you might detach and you might still miss them. You might still feel the urge to check, to reach out, to ask, to see if they care. That urge is human. But every time you honor that urge, you reopen the door that your healing was trying to close. Detachment means you let the silence exist. You let the absence be real. You let the space do its job. You stop making their emotions your project. You stop trying to control whether they miss you because that control is the same trap you've been in, the trap of basing your worth on their response. So instead, you make your own life louder than your need for their recognition. You put your energy back into your body, your sleep, your work, your friendships, your goals. You treat yourself like someone who matters, even if the person who left acted like you didn't. And this is the part that transforms you. When you detach, not to get them back, but to get yourself back, you become someone different. You become someone who doesn't beg, someone who doesn't chase, someone who doesn't accept crumbs, someone who can love deeply and still walk away when love is not being returned with respect. And if they ever do reach out, if they ever do realize that losing you wasn't nothing, you will meet that moment from a new place. Not from desperation, not from hope, not from fear of being alone, but from standards, from boundaries, from calm. You will not be impressed by words. You will look for change. You will look for consistency. You will look for effort that lasts. Because the lesson is not that they finally miss you. The lesson is that you finally stopped letting your heart be treated like something anyone could lose and call it nothing. You need to understand something that will feel uncomfortable at first, because you've been taught that silence means you're losing, that if you don't respond, you're being childish, that if you don't explain, you're being cruel, that if you don't chase, you're giving up on love. But your silence is not a strategy, it's self-respect. And self-respect is the language that confusion finally understands. Not your paragraphs, not your late-night voice notes, not your perfectly worded explanations, not your patience that keeps forgiving the same pattern, but your calm decision to stop participating in what keeps breaking you. Because when you're dealing with an avoidant dynamic, confusion becomes a habit. One day you feel close, the next day they're distant. One moment they're warm, the next they're busy, the next they're not sure, the next they need space. And you start living with your heart halfway open and your stomach in knots. You start becoming a detective, analyzing their tone, their timing, their emojis, their silence, their energy. You start doing this thing where you rewrite your own needs in smaller and smaller font because you're terrified that if you ask for reassurance, you'll push them away. So you say, "It's fine," when it's not fine. You say, "No worries," when you're worried. You say, "I understand," when you feel unseen. And then you go home and your mind runs for hours, trying to make the confusion make sense, trying to make their distance feel like it has a reasonable explanation that doesn't involve the scariest possibility, that they simply don't value you enough to show up consistently. And the reason you keep talking, the reason you keep explaining is because you think love is built through communication. You think if you can just say the right thing, they'll finally get it. If you can just be clear enough, kind enough, patient enough, they'll finally stop going cold. But you're missing the real truth. Confusion is not always a misunderstanding. Sometimes it is a protection. Sometimes confusion is the exact environment an emotionally unavailable person needs. Because confusion keeps you close without requiring them to commit. Confusion keeps you hoping. Confusion keeps you waiting. Confusion keeps you trying. And as long as you're trying, they don't have to face the full weight of their behavior because your effort keeps cushioning the consequences. So when you choose silence, it's not because you don't have feelings, it's because you finally stopped offering your feelings to someone who treats them like noise. It's not because you don't care, it's because you're done proving you care to someone who benefits from pretending it doesn't matter. Silence is what happens when you realize you have been pouring emotional energy into a person who drinks it and still says they're thirsty. Silence is what happens when you stop giving access to the softest parts of you, the parts that deserve safety, not uncertainty.